Hello and welcome to the programme which looks at the Holy Land. I am Paul Calvert. Psalm 8 verse 1 from the New King James Bible says this: O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who have set your glory above the heavens.
I'm with Stephen Crabb, the former Parliamentary Chair of Conservative Friends of Israel. Now, Stephen, what is Conservative Friends of Israel?
So Conservative Friends of Israel has existed for just over 50 years. It was created on the back of an oil crisis, Middle East crisis in the early 70s, as a way to bring together those politicians within the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom who supported Israel, and as a way of also of educating and informing people in the UK, particularly politicians, about Israel and its place within the Middle East, because back then and 50 years later, still today, there is a huge amount of ignorance about the region and about Israel in particular.
Do you have many members in the organisation?
So we don't have a formal membership. What we do have is we have large numbers of members of parliament who support our work, who participate in our activities, and all of them will have differing views about the Middle East and about Israel itself. But we will organise briefing events, and we organise indeed delegations to Israel and the Palestinian Authority, where we take politicians to the region so they can see for themselves the situation on the ground, and they can learn from meeting people with different opinions, different backgrounds, about the complexities of the region as well.
Is Israel represented very fairly in Parliament? We sometimes look at the United Nations and they're constantly condemning Israel, but not other countries for things. Is Israel represented fairly in the Parliament?
So one of the things that's happened since 2024, when we had an election in the United Kingdom, which saw a big change in the political makeup of Parliament, is that the House of Commons in the United Kingdom is now a much more consistently hostile environment for Israel. There are many, many members of parliament who seek opportunities almost on a daily basis to attack Israel, some of which is done unfairly, using information that we would regard as not particularly balanced and not fair to Israel. So trying to inject balance into the debate in the British Parliament is one of the things that we take seriously. And we provide what we regard as very good briefing based on factual and up-to-date information that hopefully enables members of parliament to speak honestly and fairly about Israel.
Is it easy to represent Israel? Because sometimes the news goes out and the lie goes out, and then a few days later you actually get the real truth about what's happened.
One of the tactics that Israel's enemies have got is to very quickly, and using social media now, spread misinformation about Israel, and particularly we saw that during the Gaza conflict, where Israel was engaged in a very, very difficult operation to tackle Hamas, and every single day images were being propagated on social media that sought to paint Israel in the worst possible light at all. And you're quite right, often it's a slower process to get factual, truthful information. But of course, by then and with social media, it's too late. People's opinions have been affected and the hostility has been increased towards Israel. So it's become a more challenging context for those political advocates who support Israel, yes.
I imagine it's even harder today with AI and some of the AI videos that go out there.
Indeed, technology is changing the nature of the political debate and political battleground around Israel, which has existed ever since Israel was created more than 75 years ago. There have been nations and groups that want to see the Jewish state destroyed effectively. And so this political battle at heart is not new, but the tools that Israel's adversaries are using are becoming ever more sophisticated.
Has that become harder since October the 7th?
On October the 7th and in the days and hours and days just afterwards, there was an enormous coming together, different parties, different people of different outlooks, to express revulsion and horror about what Hamas had done and the huge loss of life and the nature of the slaughter that took place. But what happened after that with the conflict in Gaza was the forces who are opposed to Israel politically organised very quickly, and that we saw and we continue to see these large-scale demonstrations on the streets of the United Kingdom against Israel, with the most virulent anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic rhetoric being used. Technology is used, and there's almost been a stream of anti-Israel stories about the way they conducted the war in Gaza. And we're seeing it now, actually, in relation to the conflict in Iran as well, and in Lebanon. And already there are people trying to draw parallels between what Israel's trying to do in Lebanon with Hezbollah, with what happened in Gaza with Hamas.
Have you seen the video, the 43-minute video that the Israeli government produced about October the 7th?
So I've watched that horrific video 3 times now, and I've arranged opportunities for members of parliament from different parties to watch it. I have to say that a great many members of parliament who continue to attack Israel unfairly refuse to watch that video. Wow. which is very sad, because I think if they did, it just might help them see the nature of the threat that Israel faces every day.
Well, the reality is it was Hamas who recorded it, so there's nothing fake there, is there? That is the reality of what happened.
There's nothing fake in that video. It's not AI. It's not been exaggerated. It's just horrific footage captured from the day itself. And I mean, I've sat with groups of members of parliament, some of whom have been in tears and very distressed watching it. It is not something that someone should watch lightly, but I think it's a necessary part of understanding at the time what we're in, the nature of the threat that Israel faces.
Have you been down to the south of Israel and visited Kibbutz Be'eri, the Nova Festival site, and the places where the October the 7th terror attack actually happened and took place?
So I was part of a small delegation of members of parliament, and I was still in the parliament myself then, that visited Kibbutz Kfar Aza. We visited the Nova Festival site shortly after the attacks, and I've been back several times since with other groups of politicians as well.
Is it important to take politicians down to there to actually, as well as see the video, but to actually see the sites of where all this terrible attack took place?
So that's something that we think is absolutely essential, and we've continued to organise delegations of members of parliament to Israel and the West Bank, and we always try to ensure that they go to the southern border and meet different groups there, meet people from the kibbutzim themselves who were there and were affected and who lost family members. We arranged for politicians to meet at the time family members of the hostages who were still in Gaza at that time. But we also, where possible, tried to take politicians to the north of Israel as well to understand the complexities and the different nature of the challenge that Israel has on the borders with Syria and Lebanon as well.
Do you bring all kinds of MPs over to actually listen to the members of Knesset and hear their voices? And do you also listen to the Palestinian side as well?
We do. We make sure that a day is set aside on every delegation, and these delegations just last a few days. But we think it's important to go to Ramallah, go into the West Bank, and to meet those figures who represent the Palestinian people politically, and where possible meet younger people and business people as well. What we don't try to do is project a single viewpoint about Israel and complexities of its conflict with the Palestinians and other states as well. We want people to make up their own minds, but what we do is provide really quite unique opportunities to meet so many diverse voices and to visit different places as well. But understanding the Palestinian narrative and their national aspirations, I think, is an important part of the discussion.
Do you think there's a lot of confusion between the past history of the creation of Israel and of Palestine?
It's not a subject that British people, as you understand, we're taught about in schools. If you want to know about the history of these things, you have to go and find it. It's not something that British people are raised understanding readily. There's a huge amount of ignorance around about the Middle East and people rushing to make easy judgments in a very black and white way when we know that the Middle East is just full of shades of grey and complexity, and sometimes with no easy choices or no easy outcomes. So being educated is very, very important, but that's not an easy task, and knowing where to go to get good, reliable sources of information. And for us, when we bring politicians, it's about making sure that they hear different voices with different viewpoints. And of course, in Israel, there's no shortage of that. Every other person has a different view and a different take. So it's not hard to come by different viewpoints when you're in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Now, Israel at the moment is in a war with Iran, but is the UK's relationship good today with Israel?
I can't say right now that the relationship of the UK government with Israel is a good one. There's been a change since the election of 2024. The current government has taken a position largely driven by the political controversy in the United Kingdom about how the Gaza war has gone. And that's pushed this government into taking a position with Israel that's a bit more arm's length. And unlike previous governments under, for example, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, David Cameron, that were very quick to stand strongly with Israel publicly, this government has taken a much more wary approach. We believe in CFI, Conservative Friends of Israel, that the government should be stronger and bolder in speaking out in defence of Israel. So that's why I say I wouldn't describe the relationship between the UK and Israel as a good one right now.
Keir Starmer recognised a Palestinian state. Do you think that was a wrong move and also actually rewarding terror as well?
That was one of the main criticisms at the time, when you still had Israeli civilian hostages being held by Hamas in the tunnels of Gaza, when Israel was still fighting a war against a terrorist group that carried out that appalling slaughter on the 7th of October. It was the view of the leader of the Conservative Party and shared by a great many people connected to CFI that it was the wrong time to be making that announcement, that the context wasn't right. And actually, for 30 years, there's been a set of understood principles coming from what's called the Oslo Accords of how peace eventually between Palestinians and Israel will be achieved through a process of negotiation and compromise. And I think one of the main criticisms of the way Keir Starmer announced support for a Palestinian state was the way it seemed to shortcut and cut across the need for a serious negotiation, because you can't just create a state out of thin air, particularly in an area like as complex as Israel and the Palestinian territories. It is going to take very difficult compromises and a long process.
Now, the Conservative Party leader is Kemi Badenoch. Is she a good friend and advocate for Israel?
Kemi is a very strong supporter of the Jewish state. She's always very keen to emphasise support for the Palestinian people as well. But she believes that the United Kingdom has a duty to stand alongside a democracy like Israel that is under attack on so many different fronts. She's also a very, very strong friend of the Jewish community in the United Kingdom. And you and I are speaking at the end of a week which has seen a really quite horrific arson attack on a Jewish charity in North London. And on Tuesday, the day after that attack, Kemi Badenoch spent time with the Jewish community in North London, visited the charity where those volunteer Jewish ambulances had been burnt, to demonstrate her sympathies and her support for the Jews.
Do you have many high-profile MPs in Conservative Friends of Israel?
So there are a great many MPs with different profiles, some of whom have been very senior members of past governments who engage with CFI. They attend briefing events that we organise, that some of them will come on delegations as well, and are supporters of Israel. What I wouldn't want you to think is that we are a very tight membership group. We don't ask members of parliament to join CFI. We provide a range of opportunities to inform and educate, and different MPs will choose to use our material and participate in our activities as they see necessary. But what I can say for sure is that despite all of the controversy and political attacks against Israel since October the 7th and the way that the Gaza war happened, and in the wake of the start of the conflict in Iran, the Conservative Party remains a very strong friend of Israel and is keen to express its support for Israel as well.
Now, are you worried for the Jewish people at the moment? We've just seen, like you've already mentioned, 4 ambulances being burned. We've seen the terror attack in Manchester. Do they still have a home in the UK?
They do have a home in the UK, but let's not kid ourselves. The climate of fear and anxiety within the British Jewish population has been increasing year by year. And this didn't start with 7th of October. This has been brewing for a long time. And I think we've got to a point now, and this week with the arson attack on the Hatzolah charity represented a new low point. We have got to a position now where many Jews are saying, look, we are sick and tired of hearing the same rhetoric, the same promises of solidarity and understanding when these attacks happen. What we need to do is see real action to protect us. And I think that situation is becoming critical. There are a great many Jews who do openly question whether their own children and their children after them will have a secure home as Jews in the United Kingdom. But I want to believe that we can face down the threats that the Jewish community face, but it's going to take strength and it's going to take an understanding of what are the ideological factors that's really driving this tide of poison against the Jewish community in our country.
Do you think we'll see an exodus and many people just coming to Israel and wanting to start a new life in Israel?
Well, that happens anyway. It's been happening since the State of Israel was founded, people choosing to make Aliyah and live there. And one thing I've noticed over the years visiting Israel is the number of people from countries like Belgium and France that have seen a similar rise in anti-Semitism, who've told me that they moved to Israel precisely because of the tide of anti-Semitism. And so, yes, sadly, I think that is good. We will see more of that. But for many Jews anyway, regardless of the factors around anti-Semitism, there is a kind of a calling and an aspiration to one day live in Israel as well.
Doesn't it seem really sad that Israel actually had their worst day in their history of the state on October the 7th, and suddenly it's turned round and actually began anti-Semitism? It just seems crazy, doesn't it?
Well, so much of the debate around Israel and the way Israel's opponents attack it seems to be an inversion of truth. So language gets turned inside out. Israel gets accused of genocide, when of course Israel is the nation facing a genocidal threat. It's facing Iran and its proxies in Hezbollah and Hamas, who literally preach destruction of the Jewish state, genocidal intent. And yet it's Israel that's singled out and accused of being a genocidal nation, when actually it is a democracy with an elected government whose sovereign duty and its first duty is to protect its citizens, whether they are Jews or Arabs or Christians or atheists. An elected government's first duty is always to provide security for its citizens. And Israel faces a security challenge like no other government on earth.
Conservative Friends of Israel doing a work to combat anti-Semitism?
So we work very closely with leading anti-Semitism charities. We have some very strong charities in the United Kingdom, like the Holocaust Educational Trust, the Community Security Trust, which provides support for Jewish institutions and schools with security measures. And we work with people across parties as well to help politicians understand the nature of how anti-Semitism is changing and developing in the country, and hopefully adding and amplifying the voice against it.
Now, Passover is coming up very, very soon. So are the Jewish community very concerned about this holiday that's coming up?
Yes, they know that they are being singled out and targeted. The Jewish community know they're being targeted internationally and increasingly in the United Kingdom as well. And so moments like Passover, where families come together to be at one and reflect on their identity and ideas around resilience and unity and hope. They know that's a time of vulnerability as well. So anxieties will be raised this year, which is very sad. But one of the things we've been calling on the government, and the government, in fairness, has said very strongly this week, it is putting more resource, more funding towards supporting protective measures for the Jewish community.
Why do you personally support Israel?
I've had a fascination with Israel and the Middle East since I was many, many years ago as a student, and I chose to make some of my academic studies around that region and my thesis at university. And then later in life, when I went into elected politics myself, I had the opportunity to kind of move from an academic understanding of Israel to thinking about it more in practical terms and having the opportunity to visit it as well. Like many people who grew up in a Christian home, going to chapel in Wales, you learned Bible stories of Israel and the Palestinian lands, and that maybe planted a seed of fascination. But which maybe grew from there into an academic interest that then became a much more practical and political interest as well.
What is your hope for the future for Israel and for the Jewish people?
So my hope for the immediate future is that Israel can, post 7th of October 2023, with the conflicts that it's faced with Hezbollah and now Iran, that through strength and partnership working with other countries, Israel can achieve a level of security that it's not enjoyed in recent years. But much longer term, what we hope for, of course, is somehow peace between Israel and Palestinians, two groups of people who live so close by each other. It's one thing that a lot of members of parliament don't appreciate until they get an opportunity to visit Israel. It's just how close the Palestinian communities are with Israeli communities, very just literally cheek by jowl. And so there has to be a way of finding peace long term, but it seems so difficult right now. So my long term hope and aspiration is that one day Israeli families will be traveling around the West Bank, being able to meet Palestinian friends and vice versa.
What's your website, Facebook page for people who would like to know more about the work that you do?
So there's a website, www.cfoi.co.uk. That obviously stands for Conservative Friends of Israel, cfoi.co.uk. And there's more information on the pages there and a link to our X page, which has got, and Instagram, which has got social media content as well.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you very much, Paul. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.